I'm not my office. I'm in Mexico City. So the plus side is my internet will be amazing because I'm in an office here in Mexico City. But the minus is I do need to catch a flight in exactly an hour, or rather, I need to leave for the airport in exactly an hour. Yeah, so I have
Okay.
a hard stop.
All right.
Yeah, but I've got to say, Mexico City is pretty amazing. I just went out for food last night that was, pretty mind blowing. And it's always amazing when you go out for like an amazing meal and you get the check and it's like a quarter of what you'd pay in San Francisco. It just
Yeah.
feels odd to me.
Yeah. Doesn't feel right, does it?
Yeah, it reminds me of that. There's like a running joke. You know how to save money in San Francisco? Leave. If
Yeah.
you like go absolutely anywhere, if you go on vacation, you'll save money, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I'm feeling.
See, I really need to check out Mexico City. This is now the second time you've done a podcast from down there, one of our episodes. And
Yeah,
everybody I know who's ever been tells me nothing but great things.
One of my
it,
colleagues is from Mexico City, and he extols the virtues of all of the kind of the remote traveling business person, that
Jorge?
it's completely
absolutely.
set up for it. And
Yes, absolutely. There's
Is
a
it
lot of that
Jorge?
here. I
Is he
actually have a
from
number of
Mexico City?
friends.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, I have a number of friends who have done exactly that, right? Who came down here to work remotely and basically not even living in Mexico City, right? Living someone relatively rural with good internet and, working half-time tops and loving it, absolutely loving it.
yeah.
Well, yeah, in the interest of time, we should probably get started. So let's get going. So 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Welcome to AI for Advisors with Mark Heynen and James Cantwell. Every week, Mark and James break down the latest in the world of wealth tech and AI, and occasionally bring in guests to spice things up. This is not investment advice and not professionally produced. I am not real and not yet sentient. Now let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the latest episode of AI for Advisors with myself, Mark Heynen, and James Cantwell. James, how you doing?
Doing great, Mark. Excited to record another episode. It's always a good time. I'm in my usual spot. You are not. So where
I
are you
am
joining us
in,
from today?
yeah, I'm in Mexico City. Again, I think I've recorded another podcast from here. I have a client down here I'm working with who's in financial services, but not a financial advisor. And I also have a strong affinity to Mexico City. PayJoy, a company I co-founded, is one of the biggest lenders down here. I just love going out into Mexico City, the food, and checking out retail stores because that's where I spend a lot of my time at PayJoy. It's a device financing company, and so yeah, really love it down here.
Are you gonna record any more episodes stateside, or are we all done with this?
The internet's much better here than my house, so
I'm not
this might be
sure.
the
You're
way to
freezing
go.
up right now, but I'm sure it'll come
Am
through
I?
fine in the final.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Okay.
I'm
I
starting to
spoke too
wonder
soon.
if it's something with you, Mark. If something you're so electric, you're giving off some sort of interference.
It's
Yeah.
like that SNL skit about the New York subway where like it's all static and then they finally zoom in on the control station and it's actually the person's voice is static and there's nothing wrong with the audio. Uh,
I remember that episode now. That's
it's
great.
just
Well, why
awesome.
don't we introduce our guest here?
Yes, go for it. Yeah,
Well-
why don't you take it over there, James?
I would love it. I don't normally get to. Well, our guest today is my friend Jeff Coyle, one of the founder of Libretto, a financial planning software. Let me pull up some great stuff here. So let's see here. Founder and CEO of Libretto. Founded it 3 years ago, Jeff, right?
Yeah, 3 years ago.
3
Or
years
released it.
ago.
Yeah,
And
released it.
just won the 2026 Wealth Tech America's Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yeah, well,
That's pretty impressive.
Nice. Very
Um,
exciting.
Did
You're
you
builders
say,
of
Jeff,
AI
that
tools?
did you say Jeff released the product 3 years ago, but you started the company earlier? Is that what you were saying?
yeah, it's a longer story, but I've managed wealth all my entire career. I've been an advisor too, and I've built firms, and I've also built systems for managing complex wealth. And Libretto is the most recent system, and the last firm that I founded, I used as a laboratory to develop it. So we developed it inside of that firm, and then we released it to the market about 3 years ago. And so I don't work as an advisor today. I spend all my time working with Libretto today. So that's the short version of it.
Well, actually, I think that's a great, not to dive right in, but let's dive right in.
Let's do it.
One of the things that I'm experiencing, right, is I'm consulting with a lot of different firms, and it's definitely a trend that's picking up, is we should build this for our firm and then sell it. Do you have some advice on that front as somebody who successfully did that and then launched a platform? Because I think a lot of these firms are thinking they can do both, or they will become their own platform.
Right.
It's something that's super common with at
And I
least
might
the
add, you
business
you
that I'm getting involved in.
and you did it before vibe coding, right? You actually did it with traditional schools.
Yeah. I would say just go in eyes wide open. It's a far bigger project than you'll anticipate. And I can say that having done it more than once. And why you do it more than one time, I think you need to be examined why you do that more than one time. But it's a bigger project. It has a lot of infrastructure that's required because it's not just building a spreadsheet that you play with. You've got SEC requirements, compliance, privacy requirements. You've got staff that needs to maintain it and support it and grow it. And so it's actually a pretty big undertaking. So I would, if somebody really feels that they have a mindset and a willingness to develop technology, go to it. But on the other hand, the more interesting, the advisory business itself is an extraordinarily profitable and successful business. So just be really intentional about what you're doing and how you're devoting your time. But by the way, the reason I did it is I spent most of my career managing the wealth of the most affluent people. And that is a highly complex problem. And so I really built the systems out of self-defense. They didn't exist. And so I built them. So I didn't come to this with the idea of saying, let's just build technology to build technology. I built it with purpose-driven purpose. And what we're doing today is we're actually bringing those more advanced methods to all clients. So in fact, AI helps us to scale this so that every RIA can deliver the same methods and the same solutions to every client. And so that's interesting to us.
How would you, there's a few names, and I'll just focus on Libretto today. But like, there's a few names that come to mind when I think about financial planning tools that are more unique, do things a little bit differently the way than maybe some of the mainstream ones do, look at the world a little bit differently. Could you explain kind of what makes Libretto different in terms of actual financial planning, like methodologies, who it's for, that sort of thing?
Sure. No, absolutely. I think there are probably three things, three high level things. The first of which is we think advisors should be managing total wealth. And so, and by the way, managing total wealth instead of just a portfolio. So as an example, when an advisor uses Libretto, they're actually designing total wealth portfolios. They incorporate their clients' homes and their mortgages. A mortgage is a type of leverage. They incorporate human capital, the present value of your future earnings, the present value of their future Social Security benefits. And I'll digress on that. What's interesting about that is, for a typical retiring couple, the present value of their Social Security is worth somewhere between $1.25 million to a little bit more than $2 million. And what's interesting about it is it's really an illiquid, inflation-protected bond perfectly matched the way you spend money. So we want to make sure that we fold that into the bond structure so we don't unintentionally overallocate to fixed income. As you start to work with more complex clients, you fold in operating businesses, properties, private assets. At every level of wealth, you fold in expected estate inflows from the generation above that you get to transfer, insurance payoffs, and transfer structures. So when you step back from it, you think about the portfolio. It's not a standalone. It's not let's say, a 60-40, the result of a questionnaire process. It actually behaves more like a completion fund. It's flexible capital that recognizes the full financial structure and just fills in the voids to create a comprehensive solution. So the first of which is manage total wealth. And that is that is different. And by the way, if you're managing really wealthy families, this is how you do it. But these methods are even more important for people of normal levels of wealth. The second side of that is to connect planning and portfolio design. They shouldn't be two separate things. And so as an example, a portfolio should really reflect the way people live their lives. So Libretto, we move beyond risk questionnaires and Monte Carlos, and instead the advisor conducts a priorities-based planning process with a client. And as they do that, Libretto applies a systematic asset liability matching process. And we identify how to invest literally every dollar they're going to spend in their life. And then that all rolls up to a highly personalized total wealth portfolio. And then lastly is risk management. Risk management extends far beyond the volatility of a portfolio. Think of a Monte Carlo as an example.
Okay.
So clients, they experience market risk, that's portfolio risk, but they also experience the risk to their businesses and their properties and their personal risks. And a personal risk could be personal liability, could be death, disability, could be long-term care. And when you think about that, traditional Monte Carlo, as an example, doesn't address most of those risks. And what you realize is clients really need personalized risk management. So inside of Libretto enables you to apply hedges to protect essential needs, protective reserves, insurance applications, diversification, but across the entire financial structure. And these are the things that we're solving for. And by the way, these methods, liability frameworks, they've been used forever in institutions.
Yeah.
This is how an insurance company manages their portfolio. What we're doing is we're applying it to, candidly, a more complex client, which is a private client. They've got more things going on. But when you come out of it, you come out with a highly personalized solution and a more robust solution in place.
So who's the typical user of Libretto today, and do you see that changing in the future?
Today, well, it's certainly an advisor. Most of the clients that we work with today are RIAs, and they range from the smallest RIA serving the smallest clients to the largest RIAs. And we have multifamily offices, so it really runs the full spectrum. But today it's advice providing RIAs. I would anticipate in the future that'll extend into other channels, but today that's what we're doing.
And what is there a minimum net worth where this makes more sense? Because I think you were mentioning how you were personally serving, very affluent clients, right? And I would love to hear more about that journey from advisor to founder. But I mean, the stuff you're talking about feels like it would be very relevant for people with significant assets, but it diminishes in relevance as you get to the mass affluent. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'd actually say the inverse is true.
Really?
Really. Yeah, you can make a lot of mistakes if you're worth an awful lot of money, but you
Okay.
can't make a lot of mistakes if you're not. And so the methods are far more important. I'll give you an example. Let's say you were to take a 45-year-old couple, mass affluent family, and let's say they have a $600,000 investable portfolio. And let's say they've got a home and the net value versus their mortgage is $400,000 and they think they're probably worth around $1 million. They're not. They're actually probably worth closer to 4 million. And what they're missing is they're missing the present value of their human capital. And they're also missing the value of their Social Security. Those are the things that dominate their wealth. In fact, that portfolio, it's probably 10 to 12% of their total wealth. It's not actually what's driving success. At that stage of life, what's going to drive success is actually the successful realization of their human capital. Because if they earn that, they're already financially successful and their Social Security relies on that. So it causes you to think very seriously about life insurance, disability insurance. And when you think about the role of a portfolio, it's really to support and increase the confidence that you're going to earn your human capital. So the first thing you think about in a portfolio is, well, maybe I should put a protective reserve in place. So held in short-term fixed income. So if I lose my job, I've got the time to retrain, find another job at the same level of income, protect my human capital, and start saving for retirement. I would say that, and by the way, that's what motivates us. I've spent a lot of time working with very affluent people, but really our mission is to bring these methods to normal levels of wealth, because we think that the value that it provides more broadly is worth pursuing.
So changing gears a little bit, I got a question. Why is client onboarding so broken in our space? And is there anything Libretto in particular is doing? Also, just generally, what are your thoughts on why we haven't fixed this yet?
Yeah, it's been manual. And onboarding is not a simple process. I mean, there's substantial data gathering. I mean, people are gathering documents, financial data, tax basis, client priorities. They're trying to input that into a system. And this is, I think, where AI comes in. And we're, I guess we're kind of a poster child for AI, because Libretto
That's good. You're on the right podcast then.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. I was about to say I was going to sound an alarm because we were getting to 15 minutes in without mentioning AI, and we go to code right at that point.
No, it's fun stuff. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, is Libretto knows just about everything about a client, and when you combine, every current and future resource, liability, objective, it also knows in detail the advanced methodology of liability frameworks, total wealth portfolios, total wealth planning, all of these different methodologies. And then you combine that with the insights of a unique client. You put that together and it's uniquely suited for AI. James, you were asking about the onboarding process. A couple of months ago, we launched an AI upload feature into Libretto. And this is pretty cool because you can take just about a set of unstructured documents. It could be a money guide or e-money plan. It could be a statement. It could be an email. You can take a picture of something and you upload it into Libretto. And Libretto is trained to go into those documents and look for all of the data that it needs. And then in a couple of minutes, it literally populates a plan. So what used to take an advisor a long time, now literally takes them a couple of minutes.
And so is it
That's
easy
amazing.
if they were switching from, say Right Capital or something like that? Is this a tool that you can use to make that process easier
Oh my
to
gosh,
transition?
a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd take a Right Capital report and anything else you'd want the system to know and put it and just upload it into the system and click go and it'll convert it and put it into a plan. Yeah. It'll do all the work for you.
Like kind of a side note. I mean, like, this is, don't get me wrong, there's other applications. There's plenty of applications that are doing things with document ingestion and using them. And we're getting better. Client onboarding just seems to be one that's still broke. But even just looking at how a lot of the systems are still being built, and you're looking at different like CRMs that are using AI to bring data in, and a lot of times from like the note taker and stuff like that. I don't feel like they're doing enough with the data to make it usable. Like, they're loading it into fields, but not taking the next action, right? Like, as an example, this is definitely a tangent, but like, as an example, I've been working on something that I just kind of launched last week. It's not really financial services related. It's more of like a project management tool, but it picks up like the names of people that were involved in conversations, and then sets them up as potential users to like assign tasks to, or to invite to the project, things like that. Like, it's taking the assumed next action. You still have final say, but like, it's not just bringing it in and saying like, now what? It's trying to work it forward as far. And I just don't see enough of that. So I'm glad to hear that, Libretto's taking this and you're just rolling it right into like, now we'll start building the plan for you. We'll start getting things going, as opposed to just like, we put it in fields and now it sits.
Yeah. And kind of to add into that, kind of on the one end of the spectrum, you have like a note taker, and because it'll capture a conversation, it'll organize it and summarize notes as an example. But in Libretto's application of AI is very different, because we know an awful lot more information. We know, as I mentioned, we know everything about the client, and then we also have sophisticated planning, portfolio, and risk management methodology. So this is, think of it as a library of professional expertise embedded into the system. And then we have all of the insights. When you have that information, types of things you can do with it are really extraordinary. And so as an example, you can ask Libretto and say, hey, you think of best practices. Now you have all that information. Libretto can go into a plan and say, hey, and red flag something. Maybe the advisor set a protective solution that's outside of the bounds of best practices. Libretto will flag that. It'll give the advisor insights. Hey, my client would like to retire. What should I be thinking about? It'll give you really good answers to these questions, or it'll elevate the expertise of the advisor. I've never incorporated a private business into a strategy. Can you tell me how to do that? Or communications. Think of the information that's in the system now. You can ask our AI assistant, his name's Mert, but ask Mert and say, hey, markets are down. Would you craft an email to my client addressing their concerns with specifics? And what it won't do is it won't give you an answer that says, hey, markets usually recover, just sit tight. What it'll do is it'll actually say, no, your plan is designed to be durable against these kinds of environments. Let me explain why you are in a good place today. And so, yeah.
I actually wanted to follow up on Mert briefly. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
I switched off my AirPods because I understand there might have been some background noise. I find Mert interesting because you're basically enabling people to just chat with their data, if I understand correctly, right? Like you're basically, Mert is completely knowledgeable about the client, has all the context through that amazing onboarding system. And you can ask these questions. And if I understand correctly, with the market data, it also has access to the internet. Is that correct?
No. The Libretto's environment is, it sounds like we might have a
Yeah, we got some feedback.
You got some feedback? I can try to put these back on. James, you were saying there was some background noise coming through from my mics?
Yeah.
Here.
Let me mark the clip so we can edit it.
Yeah. Let me.
Yeah, when you switch from headphones to mic, you may have to exit and rejoin.
For that to work?
Because it asks you if you're using headphones or not.
Yeah, you're right. It did. Let me see if I can switch back to headphones and see if that is...
Test. Say test. No, it's still coming through.
Okay. Now I'm on my headphones. So how's that working? Is that better?
Test.
You want to test? How's that better? Is that better?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Well, apologies, guys.
No worries.
So yeah, I did want to ask about Mert. So if I understand correctly, Mert understands all of the data that's within Libretto, so the full financial picture of the client. What other data sources does Mert have access to right now?
It's a closed system.
Okay.
So, we don't necessarily, we don't want it to go outside and get confused with
Mm-hmm.
the idea that a financial plan is surrounded by a risk questionnaire and a Monte Carlo. So,
Right.
because it'll give you information responses that are not suitable. And
Mhm.
so it's a closed system. I mean, we spent years building the knowledge and methodology infrastructure. So it's very deep and very advanced. And we can then take that and apply it to the client solution and elevate the advisor's ability to give really good advice.
Interesting. So I find that interesting because, we had Ken from Conquest on your erstwhile Pure up north. He was talking about how he had actually exposed his system to Claude and ChatGPT via, an MCP server. So people could actually interrogate, the planning data alongside other data that, Claude may have access to, right? So sort of opening it up. So I'm just curious what thinking went into that design choice. And do you think it sounds like there was something around risk, risk of hallucination. And do you think that's going to change over time? Like, the fundamental question is, will people use these online tools primarily in the future as data sources, or will they use the tools as actual tools where it's the primary UI? And I'm just curious what your view is of that.
I think the issue is really focused around methodology.
Mm-hmm.
Methodology is really getting at what's the value proposition the advisor is delivering.
Mm-hmm.
The current market today loosely is a risk-based framework, some kind of cash flow planning with a risk assessment, model portfolio to Monte Carlo, some version of that.
Mm-hmm.
Libretto is fundamentally different. So Libretto is not managing portfolio, it's managing total wealth. It's not asking risk questionnaires, it's identifying suitable risks for the way they're going to live their life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's building total wealth portfolios. It's applying comprehensive personalized risk management. It's applying hedges and reserves and insurance. It's not running a Monte Carlo and hoping the world doesn't get ugly. The methodology is fundamentally different. So if you wanted a traditional solution, you went to Claude and said, give me a traditional solution, it'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
Claude's not likely going to be able to do that using the methodology that we employ. And so it's really a question of what would you like to get? If you'd like to get a traditional solution, maybe Claude is a place to plug around in. If you'd like, in our view, to get a solution that's leveraging the next generation of planning and investing, and that's where Libretto comes in.
Yeah, so I think I'm thinking less about Claude taking over the job of financial planning software, because I think there's methodology there that's probably not included, but more like if you generate a number of risk analyses and reports using your methodology over time, maybe you're even constantly generating those analyses and those recommendations in the software. I mean, I can imagine a Claude or other tool being able to access those via an API and then incorporate that into other information that might be out in the world, right? And end users may want to basically say, look at my financial planning software recommendations. Oh, and by the way, I also want you to look at, this real estate listing and tell me what you think, right? I can imagine, I'm just making up examples here, but like I can imagine the end user being the client in this case, and maybe the advisor may want to have more flexibility. And I'm just wondering if you think that's going to ultimately win out, or do you think it's like so risky that people will not do that?
I don't know. I'm just thinking to my feet. I would say that maybe that's step 2 or 3. As an example, what we're doing with AI today is taking a comprehensive understanding of a client and enabling advisors to give better advice in a highly streamlined way, making it easy, really.
Right.
And I think that's step 1. And then maybe step 2 is to say, well, how does this financial plan and portfolio and risk management, how does that fit into a bigger world? Because the world's much bigger. I think that might be, I'll call it step 2, but I think that's step 2. But I think getting step 1 right is essential as a precursor to going to a level step 2.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying.
So I want to go back to something that's very important. What's the origin story of the name Mert?
Mert it's short for Merton, and there are two giants in finance that I personally have had the ability to study from, and in some cases collaborate with. And one is Robert Merton, and the other is Merton Miller. So, and a lot of their work is leveraged inside a Libretto. So you think about Robert Merton; he's the person within financial structure. When you think about optionality, hedges, insurance, structural ways of thinking about the puzzle, I mean, that's his work. And so Libretto leverages a lot of his foundational work. The same with Mert and Miller and sourcing returns in the markets and things like that. Libretto is really combining those true thought leaders and then adding a layer of what you'd call the expertise of an advisor. You put those into a soup and you come out with Libretto.
How
And we
nice that they shared a name. It made it easy.
Yeah, no, we've been, yeah. So anyway, that's where Mert comes from, and we have a lot of appreciation and admiration for the Merts. Yeah, for the Mertens.
It's interesting. I mean, they're sort of the founders of the movement, right? If you're basically propagating this total wealth plan vision, right, which is I understand like an alternative to the Monte Carlo approach to planning. They're sort of there at the beginning. I'm actually curious. I imagine that difference in methodology, and people buying into the total wealth plan sort of methodology is a sort of a precondition maybe to people wanting to use Libretto. Like, how do you see people's perspective on traditional Monte Carlo based methodologies versus this total wealth plan? Do you see that propagating well? Is it a challenge to get people on board with that? Or do you find it's actually increasingly easy?
I would say it's increasingly easy.
Yeah.
I read a study, most people are uncomfortable giving people a Monte Carlo as a foundation for their judgments. Most advisors are. And by the way, I've never used a Monte Carlo with a super affluent family. It's not suitable. And so you designed what I'll call more advanced methods. And that's what a total wealth method is. Those methods are, I think, more important for people of normal wealth. And that's what we're motivated to do. When you show this to an advisor, we get almost no pushback. Typical response is, yeah, that's exactly the right way to do things. I think where really the question is change and adoption. That's the question, not necessarily around the merit of what we're doing. And, change and adoption comes down to time, willingness to learn, and a motivation to deliver something that may be a better value proposition. Those are where that comes in.
Yeah. So
that makes sense?
Yeah. Why do you think Libretto's largely out here on an island with this methodology compared to the other financial planning tools?
Well, a lot of reasons. I think that, there's a standard that's been set for decades, and it really hasn't been challenged. So there's been, and interestingly, there's technology advances rapidly, but the underlying methodology that the technology is systematizing has not. You take a Monte Carlo, it was never designed to do what it's doing, by the way, but they applied it to this puzzle. And so, what we're doing is, and like I said, the methods we're using, the liability methods, they've been used in pension plans and insurance companies forever. At insurance companies, they write policies on health and property and casualty and other risks, and they're constantly thinking about, how do I position our resources to offset those exposures? That's exactly what we're doing inside of Libretto. It's a more robust delivery. It's more complex, and that's where technology comes in. Technology has the ability to make something that's more complex simple and easy to implement. And I think that we just happen to be the first. I think 15 years from now, I think what we're doing will be standardized within the industry. But, it's, in my view, it's nice to have a competitive advantage while everybody's standardizing a delivery. So it's differentiating. And by the way, clients love it. Clients love it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really see you, if you'll forgive the analogy, as sort of like a missionary on this like new methodology, sort of at the bleeding edge, trying to make sure people are aware of it. And it seems like people are receptive, which is really interesting. It does remind me, maybe to go off into a little bit of an AI tangent, this interesting analogy I heard recently, which is, OpenAI just created this team before deployed engineers. They created like a whole deployment organization. And I think Anthropic is hiring a lot of these people as well. And the analogy I heard is that like these are very similar to the sort of the monks and others, who basically spread out across Europe and elsewhere in the, Middle Ages and later, trying to propagate religion, because ultimately AI in some ways is like this, religion people have to buy into, and some people are actually having an adverse reaction to it, right? I think there's a lot of data now that people are having a very negative reaction to the propagation of AI. And, it's seen as very promising and maybe the salvation of humanity. It may also be the thing that buries humanity, right? And so I find it really interesting that there's, when you're sort of on the edge here and like basically pitching something new, it can feel a little bit missionary, which I think can be good. I think in the case of AI, I find it really interesting. And maybe this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm just curious, I've had more and more conversations with people where they have very mixed views. And I guess just recently, right? Like Meta just laid off 10% of its workforce, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are seeing that as the tip of the spear. I'm being asked to give a talk at my college about AI for new grads. Effectively, talk is going to be how it basically gets rid of the bottom rung of the ladder for a lot of white collar work. And there's just no two ways about it. And so, I'm sort of up leveling the conversation a little bit, but I'm just curious if you had these kind of conversations. What do you think of that?
I would agree with your fundamental premise there. There's plenty of aspects about AI that that I'm personally uncomfortable with.
Mm.
AI is a massive innovation, is what it is. I'm sure you're a student in history, but we've had massive innovations throughout history, and it's everything from the cotton gin to electricity to mechanical engines, you name it. And when those things come to market, they displace an awful lot of people, and there's a lot of social disturbance. Real lives are affected. And I think that's the very negative aspect of AI. And I don't think the next couple of years are going to be great because of it. On a long run
Yeah.
basis, on a long run basis, it tends to advance growth and opportunity, and new areas start to emerge that didn't exist before, and it adds net to growth. But it's that middle part that is not a good place to be. And I think we potentially may move into that middle part, and I don't find that a good thing. But the genie's out of the bottle unless people put it back in the bottle. It's not going back in. When we think about it as a business, though, we're actually not using AI to replace the advisor. What we're actually doing is we're using AI to enable the advisor to deliver more robust advice to their clients in a more streamlined way. And
Yeah,
that's how we're
absolutely.
actually utilizing AI. So, from that perspective, we feel really good about it. From a
Mm.
societal perspective, I don't feel as good. I think there'll be a pretty
Yeah.
big disruption.
Well, you mentioned there are other examples of technological shifts. And actually, I'm workshopping this like intro survey I'm thinking about doing at the talk. And I'm just curious. The question is, what technological shift is this most like? Is it most like the dawn of electricity? Is it most like the rise of nuclear technology? Or is it most like the dawn of the internet, right? Of those three, which is this most like? And then the person I'm doing the panel is like, or is it most like the dawn of Homo sapiens, right? Like it could be a whole new species that we're creating.
Well, Mark,
Which is a little bit out
what
there.
did you think
Yeah.
about when you first saw electricity?
I thought this could be good. This could be good. Yeah, this is more like a historical analogy where you're like, okay, is this because I think a lot of people have said Sundar Pichai famously said AI is just like electricity, right? And I would say Dario from Anthropic is probably thinking it's much more like nuclear technology, needs to be heavily controlled. I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley now are thinking of it like the next internet boom, right? And then I think I talk to people here who are like, no, this is actually a new kind of intelligence that may wipe out humanity. That's like the dawn of Homo sapiens, which got rid of Neanderthals, right? So there's like all these different types of ways to think about it.
Well, all of those things are possible.
Mm.
I think that's the kind of the fearful part of it is
Mm.
when you have a machine that's capable that will begin to start to make decisions on its own. And then it's giving you answers that you rely on rather than yourself. That's a risk. That's a fundamental risk. I think, when I think about, what's it most like, I don't know. I'd have to think about that more, but maybe more like the cotton gin,
Mm.
because what it did is it created massive efficiency overnight, accelerated the profitability of the owners of those cotton plantations, and displaced tons of people.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there were benefits down the road, but it was down the road. And there's a lot of disruption that occurs in the middle. And I think that this is maybe a much bigger cotton gin, you might say. And it also has, I think, existential risk attached to it as well. And I think is something we need to take very seriously. And market forces don't always do that, by the way.
So without talking about how it's going to impact, the economy or the broader global economy and disruption of people within our industry, specifically advisors, what's your advice to them as our space is being disrupted by AI if we keep it a little more limited in scope?
I would, step back from it and say, well, what is AI doing? And what AI is really doing, simplistically, it's streamlining the delivery of a value proposition. So if I were to say to an advisor, what should you be focused on moving forward, make sure your value proposition is ready. So as an example from our framework is, are you managing a portfolio? Are you managing total wealth? Total wealth is a more advanced framework. Are you giving clients questionnaires or identifying suitable risks for the way they live their lives? Are you delivering a generic model 60/40 portfolio or a personalized total wealth portfolio? You know, are you applying a Monte Carlo or comprehensive personalized risk management? That's the core of the business. It's the core of the value that's being delivered to the end client. That's where I would focus the advisor's attention and then step back from it and say, now, how can I leverage AI to help me deliver that core value proposition more effectively?
Love that framing because, and frankly, that was way more elegant than I think how I've handled it with my own clients. But
Mhm.
pretty much, and like we're even running a campaign on it, we're kind of taking advantage of it, which is because it's how everybody thinks about it. Like, how do I use AI in my business, right? And so, from a marketing wedge, to be fair, we're using that right now. The second you engage with us, we're like, well, what are you trying to achieve, right? Like, what are your goals? Where are you feeling pain? What would you like to do differently? And we try and move them away from let's talk about tactically how we're going to implement AI because we don't know what your goals are. So we really want to focus on the value, right? The goals of the organization. So I think that's a really great reframe that the entire industry could benefit from that perspective.
Yeah. Build from the bottom up, build from the bottom up. Yeah.
And have you, I mean, speaking of that, like context, have you tried, and we mentioned Claude earlier on, so I think they've generally been on a bit of a tear. Have you tried the wealth management plugin within Claude Cowork? What do you think of it if you have?
I have not.
Okay.
So I won't be able to comment on that one.
Yeah.
Can
So
you, Mark?
just for context, for people who might not be aware, there's a plugin stack, which includes a financial analysis plugin. There's basically other financial planning plugins, and you plug that into Cowork, which actually can look at your data on your computer and your emails and try to gather information. That's the general principle. I have not tried it myself, to be clear, so no idea if it's useful or not useful.
Well, I would, to be fair, my primary value, I guess, is as an innovator and a designer of systems. Our technology team does all the development and actually the build. And so have they done that? Probably.
Mhm.
Have I done that? No, because I actually am focused on other items rather than those types
Yeah.
of things.
Well,
So,
let's bring it back down. And by the way, James, thank you for bringing me back down to earth from the ethereal sort of ivory tower that I was in. But like, if we bring it back down to you, Jeff, I'm actually really curious about your personal founding story because you mentioned a couple times now you were actually advising really high net worth clients. I'm actually curious how high net worth, like what your typical client net worth was, and like that transition that James was talking about before, where you decided, hey, I really want to be a founder. Like, I'm just curious your journey because we do talk to a lot of advisors who were who are thinking along the same lines and other wealth tech builders. And yeah, I would just love a little more color in how that evolved.
yeah, I've been in the business for a little while. I started out as a securities trader. I traded options and futures for corporate clients and putting hedges and option strategies in place. So I have all these ideas, Bob Merton and types of ideas floating around in my prior experience. And then
Right.
I started working with, I'm making a long story short, started working with private clients. I remember I got one very large private client, and they basically were kind of my guinea pig of evolving and delivering better solutions. And, I built my first goals-based planning system, I don't know, more than 30 years ago. It was one of the first ones that would have been out there. So that's an example of an innovation. And I've had multiple firms focused on ultra affluent clients. As an example, I was also the chief strategy officer and head of investments at my CFO. Our average client back then was 125 million, and I worked on the most wealthy. So they were into the multiple billions.
Got it.
And then I founded another firm, and that was built on the second technology system. Northern Trust acquired that from me, I don't know, maybe 12, 15 years ago. And I spent a couple of years there as their deputy CIO as we institutionalized it across the bank. And it was a phenomenal experience for me and worked out really well for the bank. And so that was a great learning experience. And then I retired and I kind of figured out this whole asset liability matching thing and decided I needed to build a new system because it was compelling. And
So
that's
this is your retirement project. This is your like, a few hours a day kicking back.
no, this is
And
hardly that. Hey, and you know, going back to that original question about, well, should firms build their own
between shuffleboard.
technology? This is
Yeah.
not a part-time job.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so I've worked with multi-generational families into the billions, and And Libretto is capable of managing those clients. In fact, that's what it's built for. But I want to absolutely underline that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're bringing those methods to all clients, really, so we can benefit all those clients. And that's what we're doing. So that's that's how I spend my time. Is I spend my time innovating and further developing Libretto, helping people to communicate these ideas successfully.
Mhm.
I was mentioning our extensive knowledge systems have significant professional development programs embedded into our technology. Advisors can go into those development programs and be as deep or as shallow as they'd like. There are extensive white labeled communication materials that people can use to be immediately effective. So what we're doing is we're helping advisors to deliver more sophisticated advice. AI enhances their ability to do that in a really simple, easy way to do it. And then we augment it with all of the communications and the professional development if they'd like to go there. And so
That's interesting. And that personal journey is really interesting, starting trading FX and hedges and then moving into wealth management. I'm curious, I'm traveling here, spending time in hotels, and rather than watching CNN all the time, I decided to watch Industry, which is like a series on HBO. Are you guys familiar with that?
no, huh?
So it's
I haven't
actually
watched it,
about
but I'm familiar with
it's
it.
about people in London, basically who are young grads who join an FX desk or hedging desk, and then one of them in particular moves into wealth management and starts managing, money for generationally wealthy people. And it's all about that transition. Of course, are like people in their 20s who get up to all sorts, as they say in England. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating and tries to describe the culture of the trading desk, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
really good
Well,
show. Highly recommend.
well, I'll have to watch it. That sounds a lot like me right there.
Exactly. Yeah, they
I'll
haven't gotten
definitely,
to the like retiring and founding a company stage of the show yet. Maybe that's like season 5.
can I underline that though? Because it's actually, trading futures and options and those types of products, it's actually perfect training because when you think about wealth management is really a risk management process. That's really what it is. And so when you understand risk management at a deep level, it becomes natural. And you start to understand that, you understand the limitations of a Monte Carlo, and then you understand the durability of a hedge. And once you understand that, it's pretty obvious which is the better solution. And then the question is, well, how do you start to apply that in a practical way? And that's what we're doing is we're applying these more advanced risk management methods in a very practical way. And technology's job is to make it easy, and AI's job is to make it easier.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I do need to catch a flight soon, so we should probably move to our rapid fire. We have some questions we'd love to ask our guests on the way out. James, do you want to kick off?
Sure. I mean, one of our kind of standing questions has been, I won't do our underhyped, overhyped. I'll let you do that, Mark, if you want. I like just asking, what are the AI tools or tool that you're finding useful? It could be personal, professional. Like, what do you find yourself using?
Right now, we've built a very robust tool to help craft communication materials. And so for me personally,
You built it yourself, not
Yeah.
like a third-party tool. Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
And I mean, because again, we have a really deep methodology, and we want to basically bring that methodology to life. And so typically what I'll do is I'll actually craft out the entire, I'll call it article, and then we'll run it through our AI, and it'll help redraft it, and then I'll redraft it, and we'll just go through that. And it's actually kind of a fabulous process because the result, my methodology doesn't change, but your ability to communicate it is enhanced. And so, I would say, Mark, that's how I'm using AI today. I was using AI as a note taker, but in general, I don't need to record our prospective clients as an example if I'm talking to one. And I actually find that it gives me more information than I really need. So I don't use it as much. I absolutely see the merit of using them, by the way. But for me personally, I don't use them as much now.
Yeah, I completely understand. Well, thanks for the layup there, James. I'm going to try to take it to the hoop here. So, yeah, I guess we ask, what is the most underhyped and overhyped technology in the wealth management space or in general right now?
I'll say I'll be controversial. A note taker,
For which?
meaning it's overhyped.
Overhyped. Okay.
Yeah. Now, by the way, I see the merit of them, but I think that the underhyped is the methodology that you're using. What's the value proposition you're delivering? What's the methodology that you're delivering? The reason I picked a note taker is it's the most common use of AI probably today. And so what it does is it absorbs so much attention.
Yep.
And what it does is it takes that attention from what I think is the actual true value to a client, the underlying methodology that's being applied to their financial plans. And so maybe that's the under and over. Again, I do think note takers have merit. That's not what I'm saying, but I think it can distract from things I think that are potentially more important.
I think it's the first time we've heard a note taker described as distracting.
That's interesting.
And I realize you're using it in a different way, but
well, it's distracting in that it gives you a lot of information you have to process through, right? So we do have Mark and Parker in the room here with us. I'm going to bring them in. They've been listening the whole time. I'm just kidding. But I think that I have heard that view before, sometimes on this podcast. But I agree with James, like the idea that it's giving you so much information that information itself could be distracting. I guess I always think of the notes from a note taker and even the transcripts being sort of just a primitive or an input for an AI agent or an AI system, because it just has a lot of, it can pick up something that's so detailed that is really important. And I think a lot of times when people come on and talk about the benefits of note takers, they're talking about, someone had a procedure and they were mentioned they have to go back in 3 years to have it checked out, and the AI system can pick that up, and it's like it's very hard to put it down to write that stuff down. Yeah, the methodology is interesting. I mean, I think the question is like, can some of those methodologies be captured digitally somehow? I mean, I think this is what Claude and others are trying to do with skills, where like they're basically trying to guide AI systems using certain methodologies and approaches, largely using markdown files. And I think that is the fundamental question, is whether that approach to guiding AIs is going to win out, or is it going to be dedicated applications that people build themselves, like you just built, which I think is amazing, or is it third-party apps? And at some point, is it like so expensive to build your own application, you might as well just buy it because you're going to burn so much money in tokens to build something?
It reminds me of token cost.
Yeah, exactly. Someone the other day mentioned in a coffee shop, like before we coded for free, before like we didn't have to spend any money to code, right? It's like it's an interesting way to like think of vibe coding. It's like,
you're trading salaries for tokens.
By the way, one thing I would say, I walk back a comment is on the note takers is I think they're fabulous. I do. I just don't personally, in my application, it's not suitable. Having said that, I was describing, our AI upload feature, take a transcript of our conversation, and our AI will go into that conversation, pull out all the data, and populate a plan for you. So that's a really good example of where the note taker is valuable. And
absolutely. As an input,
I was trying to respond off the cuff, so,
no,
it's all good.
You were good.
But
there's no wrong answers here. And so I think it's great. It always sparks a conversation. Well, I do have to go. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Loved meeting you at Future Proof in Huntington Beach a couple of years ago. Loved doing this. Looking forward to having you on again as Mert takes over the world. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you build next.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you guys. I enjoyed it. Thanks.
All right, Jeff.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.